So we'll start with a kind of overview of what Flourish is. Um, Essentially, it makes it very easy um, to create charts, maps. There's a load of different visualizations, even some that the things like they've got countdown timers and things. They're not necessarily kind of what might spring to mind when you think of a visualization. It was originally designed for use in journalism. So lots of newspapers and newsrooms use it to produce their kind of visualizations. For most use cases, and certainly for most of the things we're talking about today, it's completely free. Essentially what gets charged for is making the data private. So there's implications there in terms of sensitive data that might be included in visualizations you make. There's then the option to pay. It used to be quite a big jump to the paid tier, but there's now seems to be a kind of middle tier that's a bit cheaper. And I think they do also talk about discounts for charities. I've personally never paid for it. So it's possible to do an awful lot just with the free version, so long as you're sort of happy for the visualizations you make to be accessible, kind of without password protection. They're not public in the sense that they're kind of shared everywhere, but they are public in the sense that if someone has the link to your visualization, they can see it. So that's one thing to kind of consider. They're also a UK company, so they're based in London somewhere. And the main advantage of that is it means that lots of it is set up for the UK context. So for example, in mapping, quite a lot of the base maps that they've got are already, like there's the London map there, there's a UK parliamentary constituencies and things. So that's a kind of advantage when for UK based charities. Yeah, and just to say, I'm not affiliated with Flourish. I don't have any kind of contact with them or not paid by them or anything. I'm just a sort of fan and a kind of heavy user of the site. I'm definitely someone where data is my thing. Graphic design is definitely not my thing, and I don't have a very kind of artistic eye. So what Flourish gives me is that kind of ease of creating very professional looking visualizations when definitely not a graphic designer. So in terms of some of the practicalities for both for today and for kind of using Flourish in general, you need to sign up for an account. You can use sort of connect your Google account if you have one and you want to do that. As I say, it's free if you're happy for the visualization, the data behind it to be made public and people can kind of duplicate that. It's important to make sure that you're not sharing sensitive data. So I think there were use cases that we talked about just now, like sharing where service users are located, for example. It's possible to do that, but it's just worth thinking carefully about how you're doing that. So it could be that rather than the location of individual houses, for example, that it's more of a heat map where we look at small areas and kind of count the number of people who live in those areas. So that it's just worth thinking about. I mean, I think it would be the case no matter what tool you're using to kind of visualize the data, particularly if you're then sharing that more widely. But it's definitely worth thinking about the data that you're including there. And it could be even if, for example, if you just upload a spreadsheet and it's got lots of sensitive data in it, even if you're not visualizing those columns in that spreadsheet, it could be that data is kind of exposed in kind of behind the scenes. So it's definitely worth thinking about that before you put sensitive data up there. And also Flourish is very much it's not a kind of fully featured Excel spreadsheet. So you do need to have done some data preparation before the data gets into Flourish. And I'll kind of talk you through that in the first step of when we're doing the practical exercise. But yeah, you usually need to have thought about the way you want to present the data before it gets into Flourish. And that would usually mean using Excel or some other you might have a kind of reporting tool from your CRM, for example. So just thinking about how you've prepared the data before it goes into Flourish. I thought it might be useful just to outline some alternative tools that I've used and that others have used, because Flourish is by no means the kind of only tool that does this. So some of the tools you might have heard of are there's Data Wrapper, which is based in Germany, but again aimed at journalism, and with a very similar kind of workflow. Plotly have a tool called Chart Studio, and there's a tool called Raw Graphs as well that I've used before, and they do very similar things. And then the other ones, these three are more kind of fully featured dashboardy type tools. So we mentioned Power BI at the start. There's also Tableau, you might have heard of, and Google have a similar product called Data Studio. So these are more about bringing different visualizations together and making kind of dashboards. And there's quite a lot of emphasis with these on data that's kind of automatically updated from source. Flourish and Data Wrapper is more about taking static data that you've already kind of exported. So the charts that we're talking about in Flourish generally won't be kind of updating live from your database. They're more kind of a one-off chart that you've made. It's obviously easy to then update those charts with new data, but it's not as easy as it's not doing it itself in the background. So yeah, why use Flourish? So these are kind of my opinions. Hopefully you'll kind of see them too, but it definitely feels very easy to use, but also has a lot of kind of flexibility built in. You're not restricted to just kind of the default settings. I think it produces very professional looking visualizations, and certainly there's a massive range of different types of visualization you can do, and in some ways that choice can be a bit overwhelming, but yeah, it's extremely flexible. And then finally, it's very easy to share and kind of use the charts as well. So you can download images to put in reports, you can embed on websites, you can share them on social media, and some of them are kind of interactive, so people can click around or change the fields to show different things. So yeah, it's a really kind of powerful and flexible tool. And as I say, the free tier for it is very generous, so it does allow you to do a lot without needing to pay, which is very helpful for charities. Okay, so I thought we'd look through some examples. So these are kind of real life. Some of them are real life, some of them are kind of experiments, but yeah, hopefully it gives you a sort of sense of the range of different things that can be produced. So if we start with kind of simple charts, so this is where in a way Flourish provides a kind of alternative to a sort of nicer looking alternative to the sort of default charts that you might find in Excel or something like that. So starting with, this is a kind of fairly straightforward stacked bar chart, and if you click on it, should have loaded these up first. Well, it's taking a long time. There we are. So you can see here we've got buttons along the top, and that allows you to change what area the data relates to. So it's just 4 different selections there, and you can see that changes the chart. You can always also use the legend here to switch on or off different bars. So even by default, you can see there's quite a lot of sort of interactivity built in for people to be able to use the data themselves. So if we go on to the next one, so again we've got a line chart, and similarly the when it loads the buttons at the top allow you to switch between different kind of values, and then you can also switch things on and off using the buttons in the legend, and that will allow you to change which bits of data. So if you wanted to exclude private transport and just look at the change between the others, then it's easy to do that. Scatter diagrams, again, easy to do, and this one's showing a relationship between two different values across local authorities, and again, when you hover over them, you've got interactivity, and it will tell you this one's the Isles of Scilly, and it gives you the measures. So again, a nice kind of professional looking visualization, but with the ability for people to kind of interact with it. And finally, you can use these kind of simple charts to do more complex things. So this is quite a nice tool that they've built using birth records, so you can see how the change in different in the popularity of different names. Yeah, you can add names and compare them. You can put them all on one chart rather than lots of separate charts. So yeah, that I think is quite a nice example of how people have turned a simple chart into quite a neat interactive kind of visualization. Okay, so those are the kind of, as I say, the charts you might see in Excel. One thing that Flourish is really good at, that I've used quite a bit, is being able to visualize networks and relationships between different items. And this kind of moves beyond what might be possible in Excel or Power BI. So this is one that I've done for 360 Giving. It's a bit tricky to see, but essentially all the names around the side are the names of different funders, grant-making foundations, and then the strips going between them are the number of recipients that they have in common. So the number of organizations that have received grants from both organizations. So this big one here is the Big Lottery Fund. This one over here is Cooperative Group. And you can see that there's quite a big chunk of organizations that have received grants from each of them. And this was something that in the, certainly at the start of the pandemic, funders wanted to know, well, who are the organizations that we have in common with other funders, so that they can hopefully be a bit more strategic about the grant making that they do. And again, this is interactive, so you can click on particular groups if you're interested in them, and if you hover over them, it will tell you the number of organizations that they have in common. So similarly, you can start to do these kind of network diagrams as well. So again, here the yellow bubbles are the funders, sized by the sort of number of grants they make, and then the blue ones here are recipients, which are connected to each of the funders. So some of them you can see are connected to 3 or 4 funders. Some of them are just over here connected to kind of 1 or 2. And then finally, this is one I've done quite recently for 360 Giving, and this kind of visualizes a sort of hierarchy of, so these are all the funders that have shared data under 360 Giving, grouped into different, so here's the lottery, here's grant making organizations, here's government and community foundations, and so you see that the circles are sized by the number of grants that they've shared, and again it gives you a sense of the makeup of that sector. So there may be similar things that you could visualize, and this one here has a It's a bit small, but up in the top corner you can change how it's visualizing. So this is the number of grants that they've shared. You could change that so that it's the size of the grants that they've shared. So here government have shared a lot more larger grants compared to the other groups where it's a bit smaller, or you can share it by the number of kind of unique recipients that they've shared. So government gets a bit smaller again. Okay. And then the next one is mapping. So quite a few people mentioned maps when we were introducing ourselves, and that's definitely one of the strengths of Flourish is its ability to produce maps, and that's both in terms of kind of the sort of visualizations that are easily available when you first log in. There's loads of different types of maps in there, but also there's quite a lot of customization possible in terms of bringing your own boundaries in there. So for example, people talked about ward maps in a particular borough. That's definitely possible to bring those boundaries in and produce your own map rather than needing to use one of the default ones that they've got. So this is one I produced when we did a sort of day-to-day a couple of years ago when we were allowed in the same room together. And this looks at, so it was looking at advice services. So the background of the maps, the kind of green color is the poverty rate from the London poverty profile, and then what we've done is placed a point on here for lots of different types of organisations, Citizens Advice Bureaus, other organisations providing advice. So that's based on the postcode of where they operate. So you can get a sense of the relationship between the kind of need in an area and then the provision. So this was a very kind of quick example that was produced in an afternoon during a kind of a group day where we were experimenting with some data. And again, this is nice and interactive in the kind of live version. So you can hover over the boroughs and it will tell you the exact poverty rate, and then you can hover over the dots and it will tell you exactly which organisation it is. And if you're interested in just one of those, then you can switch the others off and it will show you just Citizen Advice. So again, very, very kind of flexible. The other thing I should say with any of these is that in the top right, you can see there's a duplicate and edit button. So if there's rather than starting from scratch every time, if there's a visualization you want to steal or use as a base, then certainly a lot of what I do is thinking, oh, they've done that nicely. I'll steal that one and put my own data in it. So that, and it makes it very easy to do that. And then some other kind of mapping. So this is a map of the results of general elections. Again, this was made by Flourish themselves. And this is called a HEX Map. So this is showing each hexagon is a constituency. So you get a bit of a better sense of the distribution of seats as opposed to the kind of land area that they cover. So that gives you a bit of sense of how many MPs there actually are and where they are. And again, this is, if you click through, this is interactive. You can also, another thing that's possible on any chart is down here. It's very small, but it says data sources, and then it's got links to the sources of data. So that's somewhere where, again, you can link out to places to show where you've got the data and the kind of provenance of it, which I think is very helpful. And then finally, this is a map I made for an organisation that wanted to look at how community businesses were related to kind of commercial chains. In this case, it's looking at coffee shops in Liverpool. Excuse me. So rather than being a kind of heat map, as we've seen before, or a kind of overview map, this is the sort of street level map with each point showing a particular organization. And again, like with the other maps, you can click on the legend to turn things on and off, or you can in this one you can then zoom in. So if you're interested in a particular area, you can see the different points at a low level. So yeah, a few people mentioned mapping. It's really flexible in terms of what's possible with mapping, particularly compared to some of the kind of more complex tools for mapping. And then I thought I'd show a taste of some of the others. There's a real kind of massive variety in what's possible. So this is just a kind of a taste of some of the options. These are quite nice and have done quite well on social media. This is a bar chart race. So if we look at it here, you can see the bars are moving as time goes along, and it allows you to see, I'm not entirely sure what this is actually measuring, but some measure of something between different countries, and you can see the change over time there, and you can pause it and move along the timeline. So yeah, that's quite a popular one on social media with you know, a little video of that. Works quite nicely. This is, I think, a relatively new one that they've added, which is you sort of wouldn't think of it as a data visualization, but it's a nice way of if you have got something that wouldn't necessarily fit on a chart, or and it's just a series of cards. In this case, it's top 30 football players from the Women's World Cup. And again, you can switch on and off different categories. So you can imagine this might be a nice way of visualizing a set of projects, for example, or if you've got a series of different centers or something, then you might be able to put this on your website. This is a really nice tool that I've used a bit. Someone mentioned visualizing surveys. So this is a survey data visualizer. And the nice thing about this is it's very interactive. So essentially each of these is a response to a survey. And you can see if I hover over it, it might be a bit small, but there's a various different measures. So I think in this case, this is a kind of fictional person, and they talk about their favorite food, their favorite animal. And you can, as you move around, so this is split into male and female. You can also make bar charts out of it. Grids comparing, this is comparing favorite animal and male and female. And then you can also present the user the option of changing it themselves. So here I've got these different options to change the color or the groups or the different sizes. So this is sized by weight. You can change that so it's sized by height. And you can even put them on a map if you've got if there's some kind of geographical element to it. So I think this is based on their home country. So you can imagine for survey data, this is quite kind of powerful. And then change them to triangles here. And then finally, this is just a selection of kind of the other weird and wonderful things that they have in the library. So in the top left here, this is a table. So again, oh, sorry. Again, you might not think of this as kind of data visualization, but it's certainly a way of showing the data and embedding it on your website. And then you can embed little charts in the data itself. This is a countdown timer. So again, if you've got something, an event that's coming up or something, it's a really easy way of adding that to your website. And this is a photo slider, so you can slide along this middle bar to show the difference between two photos. So as I say, it's a real kind of range of different things that are possible. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour through Flourish. I don't know if anyone's got any questions or kind of comments or Or anything else before we get into the main event?
I had a quick question about the cards format. Can you click on a particular card to then, could you, is there a way of adding a link or something so that you could jump to? I was thinking of you said about projects, maybe case studies or something like that. It would work quite nicely for, can you click on a card to then jump to further detail?
A very good question. I am not sure.
Something for me to explore.
We can definitely have a look. Yeah, that feels like the kind of thing they would add, and it does say you can add custom HTML. So if you know a bit of HTML, it's probably possible to add a link into that.
Link to a particular web page or something.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I was just going to ask, how do the cards get the images?
So I think we'll see it when we do the kind of practical session, but it's possible, as well as having kind of text and numbers in the fields, you can add kind of upload images as well, or have a link to. So if all the images are kind of uploaded to your website, you can then use that link and add that to the table, and that's what it'll kind of add them in there, I think.